Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday, so it's Writing Wednesday. Um, it is, I wanted to say that thank all of the people who took my Writing from the Senses class. If you did, we're going to deal with some subjects today that relate to the senses, but not the way the class worked. The weekend intensive was taking each sense one at a time and seeing what those senses, hey Shona, what those senses are the best for in your writing. How do you use scent? How do you use sound? Scent is great for memory. And we always remember scenes subtly because the reader has a body. The reader is an organism, just like comes complete with all the senses preloaded. And hi, Jill. And so when the reader is in your book, in your story, and you give them the sense information that I've been teaching and talking about, uh, and they smell something, they'll remember that location because it smelled like corn dogs. Say it was an apartment over, um, over a beachside uh, burger place, and you could smell the burger grease or the corn dogs or whatever. They'll always remember that apartment because, hi Lissa, because it smelled like corn dogs. Oh yeah, people. Every book I write, I make sure that each of the major characters has their own smell. It helps. Everybody does have a smell. We don't think about it. It's it's mostly unconscious. Hey, Sayward. It's mostly unconscious. Hi, Brenda. It's mostly unconscious, but if you can give a character a scent, it helps the reader remember them. Um, that more than having, brown hair and green eyes, to say that he smelled like honey and cigars will help people remember that character. They smelled like hay. They smelled like pencil lead and chalk. They smelled of violets, which is a very elusive scent, so a characterological scent. Um, every sense helps the reader enter the body of your story. Um, so scent is good for memory. Sound is good for dimensionality because hi Kimberly, because you can hear things up close and you can hear things far away, and the reader thinks, hi Roberta, hi Toby, the reader believes that there is a complete three-dimensional world if you can both hear things close and hear things far away. There must be like a real world. So remember when you're writing to move between the dimensions with sound, and have occasionally, when somebody stops speaking, to hear something very close. I can hear a little clock that ticks on my desk. I can hear traffic out on the 5 and the 2. I live near two freeways and it sounds like a river at all times. But I don't hear it when I'm conversing or thinking or writing. But when I stop, there's that steady sound. There might be something in mid-level. I might hear something in another room in my house. I might hear, if you have tinnitus, you'd hear that little ringing in your ears at all times. And occasionally it would come up. If your character had tinnitus, eventually you would hear that ringing. Put them in the body of the character, and this is how you do it. So we talked about taste, which is very close to scent, very close to memory. You taste something and boom, takes you right back, or you smell something, it takes you back to time and a place. And it does that for your character. So this is how, hey Susie, this is how you remember stuff as a living person, as an organism yourself, but also how you create that character to have that. Though it would trigger a scent would trigger a memory for your character. So this is how you train yourself to do it. Vision, how to look at light falling on objects. We don't see things, we see light. Any artist will tell you that. You paint the light. Like, I don't want to, look at myself too closely. But I would paint myself rather than, if I was describing this object to somebody in a novel, I would talk about how the light is falling on the forehead, how it traces this picks up the strands of gray, but still, how it shapes the nose and this part of the mouth. And I would sit there and describe this rather than she was this, she sat there. You always look at the light and how light sculpts what you see, creates what you see. If you get up at before dawn and write down what you see, and then 10 minutes before dawn what you can see, you're going to see different things. What you see at dawn, what you see at 10 minutes after dawn. And notice how the light is suddenly creating the world that was just dark before. And what does it pick up first? And what does it pick up next? And when do you start seeing color? When do you start seeing certain detail as opposed to just shapes? And and you can do that at sunset too. Half an hour before sunset, 10 minutes before sunset, right at sunset, 10 minutes after sunset. And notice how the light changes what you can see, what you can't see. When do colors start leaving? And the blue cast begins to dominate. What can you still see when it's starting to get dark? I still can see this, but and what you do is you keep all of these kind of, hey Linda, you keep all, thank you, Silver Not Gray. And you keep, hi Catherine, you keep all this in a notebook. That I love notebooks, so I'll have separate I have separate categories with little indexers for scent, taste, sounds, smell, all of them, including landscape or light. But there's a notebook, this is the topic for today, is we're going to talk about the weather. The weather. I have a notebook for weather. And what I was explaining in the class that I was teaching at the Community of Writers, the intensive on senses, that I taught 2 weekends ago, last weekend. God, it's all a blur. I did the whole weekend on the senses. And how do you capture sense impressions? Well, it's a lot to get into now, but physically, how do you cancel it? You keep a notebook like this with you at all times, little tiny one. This is my journal where I do my psychological ramblings. That's not going to stick in my purse or in my pocket. That's not going to be of use to this. You need something small. You need something pocket size like this. Or a little, some people like the little moleskins. They're a little fatter, but they're still portable like this. And I recommend to all the people who work with me to start with the weather. Start going out at different times of day, like doing the sunsets, dawn, the light, what you're seeing. But the weather combines all the senses. So when you do the weather, it is training those senses. Hey, Peggy. And so you go out at different times of day, different seasons, and Note, hi Ruthie, note what you see. What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you see? What do what's the texture of things? How cold is it? Texture. The weather. It's cold, it's hot. Is there a little breeze? Is it very still? How much humidity in the air? If it's raining, you might put on a raincoat or an umbrella, but it's good to have a really rich assortment of observations related to the season, the time of day, day of the week, because the weekend and the day of the week and the weekdays are different, especially in terms of sound. The sound on a Saturday morning versus the sound on a Monday morning, very different. The sound in a Sunday morning versus Saturday morning is very different. Saturday night versus Sunday morning, very different. And then the season, everything is going to be very different. Windows are open. You can hear different things on a summer night than you hear on a winter night. And why is this important to have this? When you're writing in the relative seclusion of your wherever you write, if you write, I write here. I've written every book sitting right here. In this, the chair changes, but the location is always the same. I am not going to be able to go out and record at dawn on that day necessarily. I'm going to go in and sit down and work. So I need a compendious amount of material about the seasons already recorded. So because it's very hard to remember January in July. You won't remember details. You will not get those little interesting moments or little interesting details that bring that season alive. So what you do is you accumulate information by doing that recording, and then you have these notebooks, which are full of observations of all sorts, and what the hell do you do with this? You'll have a ton of them, and whoever looks at this again, never. Nobody ever looked at this again, ever. So Brenda asked, do I subdivide the weather notebook by seasons and time of day? I do it by season. I do it by month. So I can find January in August. What the hell was January like? So it's very rough. I don't get into organizing things too much. If anybody's a Marie Kondo person, I love her. I find she's great for insomnia, puts you right to sleep. But her tenet about handling paper, anybody is into her, she's like, do not over categorize. Don't spend any time over categorizing. Just find a rough category that you can put everything in. So month, I organize them by month, and I try to have a good number of entries from each month so that when I need them, they're there. This is how you create your own personal library, your own materials that you're going to use for the rest of your life, and keep accumulating them. So you take this every so often. You can do it once a week, you can do it once a month, you can do it while you still can read the handwriting, and you go into your computer and you open it up and you just type up this stuff. And I usually do it like a running scroll of impressions, just called notebook, and just throw them all in there. Then you can organize them a bit by sense, so reorganize them. It's easier to move them around like that in your computer. And then print them out, 3-hole punch, and put them in the notebooks. And a weather notebook will have all the senses, so it'll just be weather. 9 a.m. I mean, this is how it looks. Here's a latest entry. that's not the latest one. The latest one is, here we go. This is yesterday or day before. I don't even know what day it is. 7:20 a.m. You always want to know. It's 10:18. It's 7:20 a.m. So this was fog. We got like some beautiful fog, and after the heat and the fires and all, to wake up to fog was amazing here in LA. I look out the window, all I see is the neighbors' electrical mast, a bit of their roof, and then white. A lone dog barks. A lone pine tree past my roof rises against the gray-white yin. And I should say, this has meaning to me and not to you, but I do Chinese brush painting, and yin element is water. So fog, clouds, if there's no water, stream, or whatever. I live in LA, I don't have a mountain stream in the backyard. And the difficulty for me is that that yin is always sort of a challenge, to leave something blank. That's how you do the clouds, is you leave something blank. Always a challenge to me. That's a throw it all inner, right? All is yin, meaning blank. Except the island you're in. Fog settles heavy on the valley. Is it the smoke of all the fires? A drip from the roof. So we have water droplets glint from the telephone wires, the edges of overhangs. It smells like the sea, like a Big Sur morning. So this is where we take I talked about this in the sense class, and if you ever can work with me, I'll keep you informed of classes I'm teaching. In the sense class, the idea is that any little scrap of sense impression, start pulling it, see what else comes. So I have fog, I have the smells like the sea, and then like a Big Sur morning. I happen to really like Big Sur, and these fogs, remind me of that. So you're looking for the associations. It smells like the sea, like a Big Sur morning. On the other side of the vale, I live in the hills, and there's a facing hill, and you don't call it the valley because there's a big river valley, the LA River, that's miles. I can see to the other side, and the low hills on the other side. So I think of the close hillside as the vale, what's inside there. So on the other side of the vale, 4 columnar junipers rise at the crest. And that's all I can see. Just the shape of those 4. About 100-foot visibility, ? Fog sinks into the valley. That's the big valley. A fragrant, foggy mystery, blathering cars, a motorcycle, but feels like the back porch of the Nepenthe shop up in Big Sur. I happen to just adore that place. Of the Nepenthe shop with its Buddhas. The cat sits in the hole where I tried to grow cucumbers and failed. Lower down, you're in the soup. It's very rare, like a supernova. The mystery by 8:10 is half gone. So it started to burn off by 8:10. The sun's muted it. Crows converse, the most intelligent bird. Now a train whistle fills the valley. So that's just about that moment of fog, and I ended up writing a lot more about it in my big journal, and what that yin means to me, and the yin, the mystery, ferns, all linked it together, and I even wrote a poem. But you can see what you get out of just doing the weather. Now eventually I'll get that into here. And so whenever I want to do October 18th or mid-October, I'll look for October, and then I'll see that there's that fog. Do I like that? Do I want to use that fog? for the scene, and some of those ideas of what is unspoken and the mystery of fog, and link into that. I'll read you a little bit of a little bits and pieces of some of these foggy, some of these time of day, or just call them the weather, because there's always weather, and it just drives me crazy that you can read people's work, their novels, and it's never a season, there's never a time of day, there's never light, there's never temperature, wind. It's like so much of reality is missing from these things. It's like they live in cut off from the world, and I'm a big proponent of the physical world, because this is a physical thing that we walk around in, and that reality is not virtual. There is real reality, and I think we're starving for it. I think people are starving for it in their work. Here's just a little one. Here's January 10th, 10 p.m. Cold, clear. A surreal and majestic sight, second half moon, hanging right between the orangish sodium vapor lights on Beverly Boulevard. I was obviously driving somewhere. Huge and orange, belly down at the end of the road, the vanishing point like a face in a doorway. I'm not going to be able to make that up when I'm writing. If I didn't grab it and note it and get it out of my little book, which I have billions of these, I'm never going to look at them again, and get it into my 3-ring binder, I'll never be able to use that. But I'll be able to use this anytime I want. Here's January 4th, 4:30 p.m. Big red ball sunset over bluish lake. Oh, I was at the lake. Okay, so 4:30. The sun sets at 4:30 in January 4th. See, these things are really important. When I was in Russia, in St. Petersburg, doing research for the Revolution of Marina M and Chimes of Lost Cathedral, the sun did not come up until 10 a.m. You have to note when things happen, where things happen, what time. Was it still? Was there a wind? Here's big red ball of sunset over bluish lake. Some kind of a heron, a little blue heron, flies overhead, legs outstretched, neck crooked like a pelican, though sharp-beaked, charcoal gray. Fallen toyon berries. Toyon is native holly, California native holly. It's really good to know the names of the plants. It's not just bushes shed red berries. It's much more vivid to know that it's California holly or toyon. Fallen toyon berries like a broken necklace. So that's me sitting there trying to capture what I'm seeing in language. So the weather notebook also becomes, anytime you write, but especially this, whatever you catch, really take a moment, an extra moment that most people don't have the time to do, but you're a writer. And how do I describe what I'm seeing? I see toyon berries on the ground, red toyon berries on the ground. That's great. But if I take an extra minute or two and go, what do they look like? I get like a broken necklace. That's really helpful. Red rocked flowers of curly aloes blooming. So the aloes are blooming. That's sort of like little cactusy kind of plant. The nursery school rooster, almost 2 feet high. I live near a nursery school. Very white and proud with his red comb and his 1 brown hen and 2 ducks. Could see it attacking a little kid. Fiercely proud of his odd menagerie. So it started with the weather. The ball over the blue lake. but I'm just taking on impressions. I'm looking for short ones because there are ones that are a page long. Here's January 6th, so I'm still in January. It's raining, dark, 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. Raining again. It's been alternating rain and glorious sunshine and flat, cloudy light. So talking about the weather in the time, generally speaking, because this is 6 a.m. So I'm cluing myself into what the weather has been like. Very useful, because I wouldn't have gotten that if I'm setting something in January, that progression of different moods almost. The weatherman predicted rain yesterday. So funny that in LA, people don't just look outside the window. They turn on the television to find out if it's raining. So a little cultural insight there. At the school, the new grass is coming through. And of course, the teacher brought the children onto the best new patch of it to do circle time, trampling it to hell. I can see the impulse to mark off the grass now. Water rolling down the window in my office, right here. Wet bamboo sagging outside. That sagging bamboo, how am I ever going to get that if I'm sitting, in September in my office with the AC on? I'm not going to remember that. But I can put that in a scene. Somebody looks out the window and sees the sagging bamboo heavy with rain. That's going to enrich my scene. Wet bamboo sagging outside, dark. I can only see a few cars rolling down the 2 freeway, a few more on the 5. They're sort of stacked. I can see them out the window. Seems terribly early, but I know it's not. Hot sun at school yesterday, and some anecdote, personal anecdote that happened that I can recall. My ex-husband and I made a fire in the fireplace the night before, and damn if we didn't sit on the floor in front of the fire on cushions and watch it together, like lovers, it was a problematic relationship, so that was kind of interesting. We had a fire in the fireplace, not a very LA thing. So anyway, I want you to see how the weather works, and try to keep the notebook and purposely go outside and capture weather at different times of day and its season. And then always ask yourself, am I doing the weather? When you do a scene, figure out time of day, what direction the light is coming from. So when you describe the room, you can notice how the light washes the fronts of the books, how it, it caresses your lover's face, around down the straight, and a bumpy nose broken when he was, 3 and fell off his trike, the little scar, the light, how the light strokes the little scar where his, he'd had his tricycle accident. The way light makes the shine in the eye, where even on the dark side of the face you can still see a little bit of reflection. So that's my plea for the weather. Listen to the birds. There's a wonderful, oh my God, I listened to, I'm reading John Burroughs, the naturalist, and he is wonderful in his description of bird call. Very hard to get. Birds twitter. Think of the cliche. Birds twitter, birds twitter. They twitter, twitter. They sing, they twitter. There's a lot more language that's there to use, and you have to collect it under sounds. Bird calls, and then make a list of things you read, things you can find, of different ways to describe those verbs, different ways to describe bird call. But he was describing birds, and I thought, gee, I wonder how I can hear an actual whatever bobolink. He describes the bobolink. what does a bobolink sound like? And sure enough, there, if you search around on the interwebs, there is a site. It's one of the colleges, I think it's an EDU, maybe it's Audubon, but it has, you can listen to the different bird calls. It'll have a little bit of, oh, and usually Burroughs is much better than it sounds better reading him than it does actually listening to the call. But one of the sites was great because they have a like a spectrograph, and you can see, you know, and you see it almost like calligraphy. And now I listen to bird calls in the backyard, and I can see them. And then it helps me think of ways to describe that sound, you know, the sharp uptake and then the repetitive little high-pitched twitter, you know, twitters or whatever you want to call it. So the weather is super rich because it's all the senses. Notice you can use other buildings. Yeah, Susie said her son Robert can tell the type of owl by its call. Absolutely. He's done a lot of bird photography and bird observation. And I mean, I can tell the red-tailed hawk from the red-shouldered hawk because we have them both here. So the red tail is keer, keer, you know, single, and the red shoulder has 3 repeats. So it's keer, 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 and it's like, oh, there it is. I you know, learn about the birds in your world, learn about the plants, plant names. What the hell weed is that? You know, find out, and then it's always yours, and you can always use it, you know. Linda says the New York Times published a piece about bird calls a couple of months ago. People could actually hear because of the quiet of the lockdown. Yeah. But as writers, we you know, that Carlos Williams said that that observation is the first act of the imagination. So first you observe the world, and then you imagine. But there's 2 steps to that. As writers, there's observation. What we see is only half of it. First, we have to see it, notice it, stop and notice. And then we have to get it out of just the passive observation. It's not actually very passive because you do have to work to stop and notice. But then it's moving through you. The impression has to move through you and go onto the page. You have to find language to describe it. And so that's the extra step. So we have to be aware of sense impression, really take the time when something strikes us to stop and notice instead of hurrying on to the dry cleaner. You know, the dry cleaner, who does that anymore? Not now. But, you know, instead of, our minds are always on the future, moving. What do I have to do next? I got to do this later, and there's a Zoom meeting, and you know, it's a fabulous practice because you stop and be where you're at, look at what you're looking at, and take time to pull it in. Then as writers, we want to actually find language to, instead of just saying crow, I just saw crow cawed. Have I heard that before? Yeah. So cliche, can't use it. So crow does what? Converses. I like it. The crows converse. And it is the most intelligent bird. It can count to 5. You know, we're lucky that they don't sing and don't have beautiful plumage. They do have sort of beautiful plumage, but they don't have colorful plumage. If they did, they would all be gone because humans are the way they are. or the way they've been. Hopefully, we're starting to grow out of that we have to kill everything. But they would, so they have survived. They're fairly large birds, and that's a pretty good sized animal that is everywhere, is very intelligent, has lots to tell us, and is all of the birds. Do you know the names of those little birds? I had to look it up. I have all kinds of reference books, usually easier than the interwebs. I have a book on a field guide of North American birds, and I'll see a bird, and instead of just going, "Oh, bird, little bird's twerping," I, to occasionally take a moment when you do have the time to say, what kind of bird is that? And then you look at all these pictures of sort of sparrowy birds, and it's like, is it one of those? No, it's kind of smaller than that, really, because it's saying it's 4 inches, and this tiny, maybe 3 inches max. And then you look through, and there's a group of birds that could be, and then you look at where they're from, and then it's like, oh, this one is common from Mexico to Oregon. Okay, it's got to be the bush tit. And they run in gangs. There's always like 20. First there's none, and suddenly you see one, and then you see 20 of them. It's like, oh, the bush tits are back. Your world starts seeming more familiar when you know what things are. So Linda says she stopped and saw a juvenile snake on a daily walk. It's good to find out what kind of snake it is. You'll be able to use it in your writing. Somebody walks by and there's a garter snake, but snakes creep her out, and she had a cold for the next 3 days. Plants. I took a ranger walk at the Griffith Park Ranger Station, just a little, easy walk, and the guy pointed out all of what plants that to me were just I called them weeds because they look like weeds to me. But a weed is a plant you don't know what it is. Once you see it and know it, it's like, oh, that's wild buckwheat, that's creosote, that's wild, that's arrowroot, that's wild cucumber. They all have names. They're all real plants that come in, some of them like a soggy area, and some of them will help you if you have a bee sting, and they all have properties, and the real reality. So I urge you to do the bird reference book. Yeah, I'll look as soon as we get off. I'll look, and I'll put it in the comments here. So that bird, the bird reference book. It's called A Field Guide to is it a Field Guide to Western Birds or North American Birds? Yeah, I can easily put that reference book. And also the bird call site. John Burroughs. Reading him is just getting language for those phenomena. You can use, if you start looking at light, means looking at shadows. And I can use my neighbor's house almost like a sundial, because the way the roof casts shadow on the wall, the depth of that shadow rises and falls during the day. Where the shadow is, where the light is striking. And different times of year it will be striking differently. Bird watching is good right now. Yeah, bird watching is great. But see if you can stop and pull it through in language, write it down, time of day, etc. in your notebook, get it into the weather book, and then you'll be able to use it. It's very amusing. These are all hobbies, but as writers, we can go the next step and make sure that we record things in a way that you can use it again. And also the impression, when you see a migratory bird that you haven't seen in a year, that's time of day. It's also that sense of seeing a friend. But you're not going to think about that when you're in the middle of a scene 7 months from now or 3 years from now. So Alyssa says, does character emotion color the way weather is experienced? Absolutely. Yes, most instance a character with autism who sees the world in pictures, or a person with depressive sees repetitive negative things. Absolutely. So you can not only keep track of the weather in your book, in your notebooks, but you can say eyes of an autistic person would see this as blah, blah, blah. Eyes of a depressed person would see this as blah, blah. If you are depressed, then you'll see it directly that way. Or if you're happy, you'll see it directly that way. Or you'll see, you see a phenomena that you're recording. That could be it, Susan, the Sibley's Guide to Birds of Western North America. I'll check it out as soon as I get off. Um, you can also notice things and then ask yourself what it means. So, for instance, one day I was looking out at the hills, the distant hills across the valley, um, and it was a bunch of green, and then I saw like one jacaranda. It was November, and there was one jacaranda that's a purple, makes a purple flower, and in this field of green there's like one purple tree. So I wrote that down, November, this one purple jacaranda blooming out of season. And then I stopped and think, okay, what else blooms out of season? And I was able to get to a metaphor for myself. I'm somebody who tends to bloom out of season. It took me a long time to hit my stride. I was in my 40s. I didn't have one of those great, these delicious 20s, where you're just the bee's knees and everything is falling into place. So I looked at that tree and I was like, oh yeah, that's a tree very much like me, very late, but, pretty beautiful when it happened. So, yeah, so you're going to be making associations, that little tip of that handkerchief, because all of these are always going to be from your own point of view. So what else anything, let me make sure I didn't miss any questions. The mournful sound of the doves. Oh, I love that. And notice what time of day you hear that sound and see if you can characterize it. Sit and characterize it. The mournful sounds of the doves, if it was a musical instrument, what instrument would it be? Does it remind you of anything? Does it link into your past in some way? See if you can get a little bit more out of the silk handkerchief. That is beautiful. Let's see if there's anything else you needed. Not everyone blooms in youth. Yeah, not me. I'll do one more reading. Going to Portal, a bird-watching sanctuary. Yes, use this, absolutely. Roberta thinks of mourning doves and gray days and bits of wisdom. Yeah, that's beautiful. I always think of wooden flutes, that wooden flute sound. Also, there's this beautiful mystery. I think of ruined dovecotes where the doves still hang around even though they're not imprisoned anymore. They're just, where there had been a coat. I'll do one more of these. What's today? I'll see what I had on this day years ago. Okay, here's October 26th, September 30th. So I guess October 26th is the October 26th, hazy, warmish with cool undertone, coming up on Halloween. First rain of the year last week. Very exciting. Sprinkle every other day since then warm again. Persimmons big and ripe on the tree. Always notice not just the names of the trees around you, I mean, if you don't know the names of those trees in your yard, the neighbor's yard, do look them up. Persimmons big and ripe on the tree. Fun watching the little finches perch on the fruit and hang upside down to eat. Everything has seeded now. I walked with the baby. So this is my daughter, who's 30, was a baby. So I've been keeping these things for a long time. Walked with the baby the other day. Saw a mockingbird hanging upside down to eat the seeds out of a huge drooping sunflower. So here are the two bird anecdotes that I could use anywhere. Even the little trees at the nursery school dangle their long seed pods, the children jumping up to grab them. The carobs in front of a friend's house smell musky in the humid evenings. Warm and sleepy yesterday afternoon. Made out with my husband after the baby went to sleep. The blinds were open on the north side. I thought I should close them, but didn't want to. Let's see. Realized something had been graffitied inside the stairwell at the front of the house. I tried to decipher it and realized it said sicko. Then we have rain. This was a year earlier, 1991, a Saturday. So 2 p.m. Saturday, rain. It's finally raining, and a feeling of relief after a long year of drought. The anticipation at seeing wetness on the back porch when I let the dog in. The clouds are all the way down to the ground. I can't see anything past the freeways at the bottom of the hill and the slow traffic and the blurred white trees. The colors are bright and water-drenched up close. The brilliant magenta of the bougainvillea against the darkened gray of the house. The blooming yuccas raising their candles like white hats on their spiny green heads. In Los Angeles, fall isn't the time of the dying year, it's the beginning, the time of the water, the time of rich earth and planting. My mind turns to planting, the trees that could go in now that the earth is turning from rock and cement to something yielding and organic, something into which a shovel could slide, a root could creep. The erratic splashing of water through the neighbor's gutter onto the rocks set there to cut the erosion, to allow the thirsty plants to drink up every drop of rain that's coming in a pure, lovely shower, coming down hard and clear, and every leaf on every tree reaches out to have the dust of summer wash from its surfaces and allow the green pores to soak in the life-giving rain. It is a beginning. It is almost Halloween. There will be fire in the fireplace and pumpkins. The sound of water is like a visit from another world. Everything is wet and dark and glistens. The smell of the earth is rich and green and alive. Birds flit daringly through the air, daring the water which is loved and dreamed. The sons of our neighbors play splashy football in the street, unable to contain their youthful enthusiasm for the release of the rain. It's mesmerizing to see the water splashing on the flat roofs. You can't see the rain falling in the distance, but in front of any close object, it's immediately evident. A large jacaranda tree provides the perfect background. It is all in gentle movement, each tiny ferny leaf washed and nodding. All the parched grass on the slick hillside will soon be green, and we will think of planting to keep from losing the precious soil. All earth is precious now and awakening. The calligraphy of rain on the windows like a secret alphabet. The precious voices of the rain. The forgotten toys of summer floating in rainwater in the plastic wading pool. The baby getting older, time moving on. Careless rusting of rakes and shovels, used and left out. Respect for good tools is gone in our day and age. We have attention spans like children. Quiet hissing of cars in the fragrant wet streets. It feels more like a neighborhood in the rain. This little hillside like a U, a secret little neighborhood. I feel closer to the dilapidated apartment house creeping boxily down the far hill. The new bright yuppie homes higher up. the quiet preschool in the glen, all the neighbors. I feel close to them all in the rain. I would not be able to get any of that if I just was sitting in my office all the time trying to just work on this one story. This is the work, the bigger work of presence in the world. So I would like to thank you for joining me for Writing Wednesday. I want to say that I'll be doing Fiction First Aid on Friday, the 23rd, through the Community of Writers. So if you go to communityofwriters.org, we're doing 15-minute consults, which is a really powerful thing. We're so used to like these thinking that information has to come in long and deep sessions, but when you have a question, when there's something, when you have done the work in your mind to know what it is that you want to know, you can get really amazing answers in 15 minutes. So it's me, Vanessa Hua, who is a columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle and a wonderful novelist, Dylan Landis, fantastic short story writer and novelist, and Tom Lutz, who is the editor of the LA Review of Books. All of us are doing Fiction First Aid. So please, it is just sometimes the answer to your prayer. I wish it had been around when I was a struggling writer. I'm sure I'll use it eventually. I did the poetry first aid. That was amazing. And any updates on your next Community of Writers class? No, I've got to sit down and talk to them. I'm going to do a weekend intensive, I think, on the art of the sentence. I think a lot of people need to take a look at their sentences. And so thank you very much, and we will see you next week for Writing Wednesday.